Welcome to this introduction webinar for StockTrak. I'm going to walk through the process of registering your class as a professor, setting up assignments, viewing reports, getting your students registered, and some of the other important information you might need to know in the future for StockTrak. The first step will be professor registration, where you're going to choose your login details, set up a class, use assignments, and get your students registered. To get started, you'll come to our homepage at StockTrak.com. Scroll down to the registration section and click Register as Professor. This will give you some of the more information you'll need to register as a professor, and then click here to create your professor login. Your login will consist of your username, password, and some of the information about yourself so we can associate the account with you and your school. Once you have the settings as you like, click Submit to complete your registration. You should receive a registration confirmation right away that has this information for your reference. We'll also send you a couple emails over the next several days that will have some more information about how you would create your class, how you could create your assignments, and how you can view your class reports. If you register to create your first class, click Continue. To create your class, we'll need a little bit of information about you, and then you can set all of the rules for the class portfolio simulation. First, your class subject. Most schools will be using investments or portfolio management. If you choose personal finance, this is going to restrict some of the trading that's available to your students to make it a little bit simpler. However, most classes will be fine with investments. Next, you'll choose the service level. The service level will control how long your students can trade, how many trades they can make, and the price. Most schools will use the gold service level, which gives students up to 18 weeks to build their portfolio and 400 trades. You also have the option of adding a buy and hold account to your class. This means that your students have both their active trading portfolio, which gives them 400 trades, as well as a passive portfolio, where they can only make 20 trades for the duration of the class. Next, choose a class name. This can be anything, but it needs to be unique, as well as the number of students in your class. The number of students in your class does not impact anything, it's just used for our own marketing when we say a certain number of students use StockTrak each year. Next, the payment method. You have the options of having your students pay individually when they register, or you can have us invoice your university for the accounts that you require. If you select student payment, you have no more payment to make now. Your students will need to enter their credit card information when they register for your class. If you choose instructor, you'll need to tell us how many students you'll actually have in your class so we can prepare an invoice for your school. For now, I'll choose the student registration so I can show you how that process works as well. Then you'll choose the dates both for the registration window and the trading window. These are the dates when your students can first come in to create their accounts, and these are the days where your students' portfolios will be active. They cannot place any trades before this date, and at the end of this date, their portfolios will freeze in time, so they won't be able to make any trades and the prices will no longer update. Finally, you'll choose your time zone. The time zone will control all the timestamps throughout the site, as well as when midnight is for all of these trading start and end dates. Next, you'll put a little bit of information about your class. Starting with your academic level, undergraduate, graduate, or postgraduate, a description of your class, which will appear on the registration page, and the author of your textbook. Next, you'll set the actual rules for your class portfolios, starting with the currency of your portfolio, the cash balance that you want to give your students to start with, and some minimum prices for buying and shorting. If you don't want to allow your students to short sell, this rule will be ignored. You can turn that off separately. You can also choose whether your class rankings are just going to be by You can also choose whether your class rankings are going to be purely by portfolio returns, or if we can also add a Sharpe ratio rankings or an alpha beta ranking. If you choose to include the alpha beta rankings, This may be inaccurate if you do a lot of trading outside of the United States. We do have the beta data feed for the United States, but some of the international exchanges may or may not provide it to us, which can cause the rankings to become inaccurate. You can also choose whether or not your students can trade on margin. If you do allow your students to trade on margin, they'll be charged 8% on any loans that they take out. As soon as your students use up all of their cash, if they continue buying more stocks, they'll be trading on margin automatically. You can also configure whether your students can short sell or day trade. We also have some settings specific for the rankings page. If you turn on public portfolios, this means that your students can see all of each other's trades. This means that the class will be less competitive, but it might be more useful so students can track what the highest performing portfolios are doing. You can turn this off to mean students can only see their own portfolios. As the professor, you can always see every student's portfolio. This is just for your students. Next, you can choose whether you want your professor account to appear in the class rankings. Your professor account can trade just like any student, and some professors like to use their professor account to set up a benchmark for their students to trade against. You can turn this on or off if you want your professor account to appear in your class rankings. You can also require your students to take notes every time they trade. This would ask your students to write a short 1 or 2 sentence rationale explaining why they're making each trade. This can be very useful when your students are preparing their portfolio reports towards the end of the class. If you turn this off, your students can still write trades, they just won't be required to take note. They can still write notes, but they won't be required to write notes in order for the trade to go through. If this is turned on, students need to write some explanation before the system will accept their order. Fill orders on daily volume is a liquidity restriction. The lower this value, the more realistic trading will be. But this looks at the current trading volume of each security that your students are trying to trade and they can only trade this percentage of the day's volume. So for example, if a stock has a volume of 4 today, if I have a 100% volume rule, I can only trade up to 4 shares. If your students are looking at all the derivatives, you want to set this higher because not every strike price and expiration date has enough volume for students to trade. If you're focusing mostly on equities and stocks, you would choose this to be lower to be more realistic with the market itself. Next, you'll choose the security types that your students can actually trade. For each security type, you can turn them on or off with this checkbox. You can choose the commission structure, whether it's going to be per trade, per share, or as a percentage of the value of the trade, the commission value itself, and a position limit. The position limit is how much your students can invest in a single security. So for example, with a 25% position limit, your students will need to choose at least 4 separate stocks to use up all of their cash. You can set this all the way up to 200%, and with a 200% rule, your students can use all of their cash plus all of their margin on one single stock. You can also set a diversification rule. A diversification rule means that this is the percentage of the student's portfolio that can be invested in equities as a whole. So if you want to encourage your students to divide their portfolio between equities, options, and mutual funds, for example, you can set this position limit down to 25 or 50%, so they can only use half of their buying power in this security type as a whole. You can also choose which international exchanges you want your students to be trading on. United States exchanges are enabled by default, but you have the ability to turn them off. You can also choose any of our Latin American, European, or Asian exchanges. Please note that not all exchanges trade with real-time data. While the United States uses real-time data, most of the international exchanges trade with a 15-minute delayed data feed, and some of the international exchanges will trade even with an end-of-day data feed. This means that if you're focusing a lot on international trading, we recommend turning off day trading. That way your students do not have the opportunity to arbitrage prices. You can set these rules separately for each of the security types, including equities, mutual funds, which includes U.S. mutual funds, bonds, which is U.S. corporate and treasury bonds, options, which are options on U.S. stocks, futures. If you do enable futures trading, you'll be required to provide some of your professor data profile to the CME. The CME likes to know that all of the futures data that we're distributing is being used for academic purposes, and so there is a very small chance that they'll ask you just to confirm that you're using this in a university setting. If you do enable futures, you can also choose the individual exchange for the futures that you want to use. Future options, again, is on US and European futures, and spots includes both Forex and commodity spot trading. Once you have the rules set the way you like, just scroll down and click Create Class to finalize the process. This will give you a confirmation page showing you all of your class registration details. The most important part of this trade is this link here. This link you're going to distribute to your students to get them registered in the class. So for example, if I open up this link, it's going to take me to the registration page with my class filled out, my teacher name, and the description I gave my class. My students know I'm in the right place. In this case, because I set it to student payment, the student is also prompted that they have to pay a fee in order to register. Towards the bottom of the page, they would enter their credit card information in order to get registered into my class. Now that your class is set up, you also have the option of adding an assignment. If you want to add an assignment, you can click the Create button to go to the assignment creation page. An assignment is a list of tasks that you can give your students that helps them build their portfolio, watch some tutorials, and understand more about investing. You can have as many assignments on your class as you like. In fact, many schools will work with 1 week long assignments. So I'll set my first assignment to be my week 1 assignment, going from today to 1 week from now. And I want my students to complete some of these tasks that are available to me. The three main types of assignments include reading articles. These articles are short, usually between 1 and 2,000 words. They're written at a fairly basic reading level, so even students who don't speak English as a first language should be able to understand what's going on. They contain tutorials showing how to students to actually trade these on the platform. And they end with a pop quiz. And the pop quiz is a basic quiz to make sure students understand the content of the article. And students will need to pass this quiz in order to get credit for reading the article. The next type is tutorial videos. These tutorial videos will have students watch tutorial videos showing them how to actually manage their portfolio, how to use some limit orders, how to make some basic trades, and how to use different security types. Students will need to watch the tutorial videos to the end in order to get credit. We also have some information about building a resume and searching for jobs. And they can also have some information about making certain types of trades. So for example, I can require my students to make 15 trades in their portfolio this week. Finally, towards the very bottom, you also have the option of adding an assessment. If you choose to add an assessment, this will add an extra quiz to your class which covers all the other information that you've asked them to do. So for example, this assessment, since I'm requiring these first 10 items, the assessment will cover 2 questions from each of the quizzes associated with these articles and videos. Once I have the assignment set up the way I like it, I will click Create, which will create the assignment in my class. Once your class is set up, you can have your students start register, in which case your most important task will be finding the class reports. To go through reports, I'm going to switch to an older class that I already have set up with a student in it already. To access your class reports, go to Admin at the top of the page and click Class Summary Reports. The class summary reports, there's 5 different reports to choose from. The first, which loads by default, is called the summary. This will list how many students are in your class, how many have activated, which means placed at least 1 trade, how many total trades have been in your class. You can also find that registration link again for your class if your students need to find it. It'll also have some information like the class name, the class dates, and how much cash and rules that you set. The next report is called the ranking report. The ranking report will show you all the students in your class with their current portfolio, return, and the Sharpe ratio. You can click View More, which will show you all of their open positions, transaction histories, account balances, realized profit and loss statements, and all of the notes that they've made with each trade. The class adjustment button, or the cash adjustment button, will let you add or remove cash from any student's account at any time. The next report is called the registration file. The registration file will list all the students in your class, along with their name, username, email address they registered with, and if your students are in partners, it'll also list the secondary users on their accounts. The user summary report will list a little bit more information about your students' trading behaviors. So it'll list each student, how many trades they've made, when's the last time they traded, what is their current portfolio value, how much was their portfolio value yesterday, how much cash is in their account, how much buying power do they have, and what's their market value long and market value short. The final report here is called reports. This is entire class export reports. So this button, for example, will download the account statements for each of my students. So one after another, it will show me each of my students' open positions, transaction histories, and account balances all in one place. I can also view the historical portfolio values for my entire class all in one report and see all my class's trade notes. If you want the reports for any of the assignments that you've created, you can also go to Admin at the top of the page and click Create View Assignments. This will show you the report card of the assignment that you created. You can switch between them here, the last time each of your students have logged in, and the completion they've made so far on the assignment that you've created. The Details button will show you what exactly they've done for each individual item that you've tasked to them. Here you also have the ability to view the assignment. What exactly did you ask them to do? View the grade books, so what was the grade that they received in all of the quizzes they've taken? And you can create another assignment for your class. You also have several other professor tools available to you. I'm going to start by going to my dashboard by clicking Dashboard at the top of the page. The first message here lets me create a message that I post to my students. This will appear for my students as soon as they log into the class for the first time and every time subsequently. This means you can use this to post messages by week using class announcements, or you can leave this blank to have this hidden from your students. I can also upload class documents. This could include a syllabus, it can include images, or any other files that I would like to share with my class. You also have a summary report, which tells you how many registrations and days left you have to register, and how many of your students have placed their first trade. You also have the ability to upload an image to your class. So if you click the Image Upload button, it's going to add an avatar to the right side of the page for your students. If your school uses StockTrak multiple times in a semester, you may also be interested in using our site license. A site license for your school would grant you up to 500 students per year. This can be only paid by university invoice, which means it will be free for all of your students to register. Another advantage of using a site license is that it would give your school access to our Investing 101 course. Our Investing 101 course is a 10-chapter investing beginner's guide that will walk your students through the basics of how they can actually build a portfolio. Students would have access to use this either on their own or as part of your class, however you choose to use it. Each chapter has about 10 topics, so this covers about 100 topics in total, along with some investing tips on how they can get their portfolios started successfully on their own. The price for a site license would be $7,500 per year. Some bigger schools are also interested in using a branded version of StockTrak. If you're using a branded version of StockTrak, this would give you up to 1,000 students per year. In addition to all the benefits of a site license, you can also get your school's colors and logos with customizable, editable content. One example of this would be the Bentley University trading platform that we built for Bentley University in Massachusetts, United States. You can see here they have their own logos, they use their own colors, they have their own images, they have their own content available. And it's a very useful recruiting tool, both in terms of having challenges where you can invite local high schools, as well as challenges where you can entice other students to join your specific department at your school. Many schools that actually have trading rooms where they have an actual trading space dedicated to investing will be looking for the branded version of the site. The cost of the branded version is $15,000 per year. If you have a site license or a branded version, our team would create the professor logins of all the professors who need access to the platform each year. This way it makes it much easier for you to get started, and you can create as many classes as you need to without worrying about hitting any caps or having any errors in the rules. If you have any questions about the branded version or the site license, you can email us at sales@stocktrak.com for more information. Thank you for joining the webinar and have a great day.